today's show, we're going to start off with the Monsignor Martin. There was an excellent game this past Saturday with St. Joe's and St. Francis, two of the top teams in Western New York going at it, and it was a fantastic game. St. Francis had a big lead on Joe's heading into the second half, but the Marauders came roaring back. They made some adjustments to kind of keep Ritz in check, and they did a fantastic job of that in the second half. But, St. Francis just scored one too many points in that first half. St. Joe's couldn't recover, couldn't climb out of that the hole they dug themselves in. Jake Ritz was really good. Xavier Janzlik was fantastic for St. Francis. For St. Joe's, Jimmy Scott had a nice touchdown run. The quarterback played okay. And Wally Wisniewski, the transfer in from North Tonawanda, made his presence known. He had a couple of great catches and did really good on the defensive side of the ball too, saving a touchdown, what looked to be a sure touchdown late in the game that would have put St. Francis up ahead by 2 scores at the time, but he did a great job of knocking a ball down in the end zone. Really impressed with Wally Wisniewski's game, and the coaching staffs of both sides did great. Jerry Smith was wonderful after the end of the game. Always a pleasure to talk to, but that was probably the best game I've seen all year.
Well, the one thing that's obvious, I think, after 5 weeks is the 3 schools in A League for the Monsignor Martin all have outstanding quarterbacks. 3 of the best, I think, in the state. When you take a look at Colin Wither, Jake Ritz, and the sophomore Tyler Becker for Canisius, they're outstanding. And there's not a couple of other quarterbacks in the area that can match up with them. And then when you just take a look at the competitiveness, when those Catholic schools are playing each other, they don't like each other, and they play smash-mouth football. And when you're looking at a repeat of St. Francis and Marauders in previous years, it's always been one touchdown game.
The main difference with these private schools that I see is the play of their line, offensive and defensive lines, and then the depth. One man goes down, another 6'3" guy is coming in right behind him, and they're just awesome. And I think that's what separates a lot of these private schools from the publics. There's excellent public schools out there. We see that there's teams right now that are just on fire with Orchard Park and South Park, but can they really compete with the Monsignor Martin teams week after week, year after year? I don't know. I would imagine they can give them games, but I would not go on record and say that they would beat them. And we hear that argument online all the time. Well, they could beat Canisius. Well, how do you know that? I mean, you really don't. I mean, can they beat them this year? What about next year, long term? You get that argument, well, Lancaster could have beat Canisius 2 years ago. Well, could they beat Canisius now? Could they beat St. Francis now? I mean, anyone can beat anyone on any given day, but the likelihood is low, and the competitive nature of those private schools and the amount of coaches they can afford to have on the sideline, coaching them all during practice, and then the buy-in. If you're there on the football team, you're there to play football. You don't miss a practice. There's public school kids that don't always show up for practice, but they're always there for the game. So I think that's what gets some of these public schools into trouble. Private schools, and you're on the football team or the hockey team, whatever, you're there every day practicing, or you're not playing. And that scholarship can be taken away. So you're there giving it all. You're every single practice. And the other thing is there's someone right behind you, ready to take your spot. That competition, at least in those 3 big schools, is, I think, what separates them apart from the others. Now, the other game on Saturday was O'Hara and St. Mary's, in which St. Mary's won 28-6. I looked at both sidelines, Dick, and I counted maybe 37, 38 players dressed to play. The numbers are really down at those schools. St. Mary's of Lancaster, they have like a dozen or more seniors that are going to graduate. So I don't know what kind of shape that program is in long term. They may not have a team next year. There's certainly the likelihood of that is possible. O'Hara's already had to forfeit a couple of games. They barely had enough to play on Saturday. They're playing Timon this Friday night, and really a must-win game for them if they're going to have a successful season. It's been a rough go for Shaq Dudley, the coaching staff over there at O'Hara, trying to get players to come out. They've had one kid went back to Georgia, another young kid went back to Niagara Falls. They've had some injuries. But talked to Aunt Chandra a little bit after that game, and there's some concern there about that program. But Chandra, he built that program back up when they had no team. So I would imagine he'll be able to do that again, I hope. But numbers are down all across the state in schools, public and private. Numbers are down. So, of course, numbers are down on the football teams. Numbers are down on the soccer teams. Numbers are down in hockey. They're down across the board.
If you look at St. Joe's, they only have 30 on the roster. That's totally different than years past.
Didn't they have to forfeit a JV game not too long ago? I believe they had to forfeit or cancel a JV game.
I think so.
That's unheard of.
Right. And never with the big three. Yeah. And then if you take a look at St. Mary's and Cardinal O'Hara, what are you looking at the future? Because you need 16 to play. The numbers neither for both of those schools are in trouble. And you get 12 seniors out of 23 players. Where are you going to pick up those? Plus, you got them coming in as freshmen, playing against juniors and seniors, a lot bigger, stronger, faster. So it's to me, it's like something's going to have to be done in the Catholic schools. 16 teams at one time in Monsignor Martin, they now have 6.
And we were having the same conversation about Bishop Timon a year ago, 2 years ago when Charlie left. You know, what were they going to do? Because everyone left Timon when Charlie left. I mean, they lost the Conley Cup winning quarterback. They lost the great wide receivers. The line left. The one kid that they got from South Park goes back to South Park. You know, so that team blew up. And Joe's done a pretty good job, Licata, in building that program back up to some degree. We'll have to see what the future holds for Bishop Timon, but the Monsignor Martins are in big trouble as far as fielding 6 football teams next year. They may not even have 4 teams. The way things are going right now, it doesn't look good. You would hope that the state can get involved in some way, and I wish there would be like a couple of big divisions for Monsignor Martin. Just take all the private schools from Syracuse to Buffalo, put them all in one league, and then from the other side, Utica all the way down to Long Island, put them in another league. And then just have a big game at the end of the year. Have it at the Carrier Dome when the Section 6 goes out there. You know, when the New York State Public High Schools have it, you know, on the Saturday. Make it the late Friday night game or something. You know, celebrate high school football, privates and publics.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But one of the things if you've got the Catholics playing for a championship in the state, why not? But you have 2 teams that are really bad in numbers right now. What are they going to do? What's Pete Snyder and the Monsignor Martin Association going to do? You can't have the kids put in a position of being one of 18 players on a team when you need 16, and it's an accident waiting to happen.
Nothing good can come of that long term.